Welcome, everybody, to the Make Life Better podcast. And today is a great topic. Today, we're going to have some fun with security. And my guest may not think that's all fun and games, and he's a lot of fun to talk to. I'm excited to have Jon Brown on the podcast today.
Hey,
Jon is
Joe.
a senior systems engineer with CCI Systems, and like I said, he's a fun guy to talk to about security and a leading expert that we have here at CCI Systems. So, Jon, welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
You bet. So, when we talk about security, I've seen you give a couple talks on that. You have a lot of experience. Just give us a quick little background in your professional life, and we can start there.
Sure, sounds good. So, I've been kind of playing security for quite a few years. I started back probably, I suppose, 10, 12 years ago. Kind of got interested in doing some pen testing, kind of playing with some network security type things. So, it kind of built into more of a service at my last company. We just were doing, pen tests, vulnerability tests, network security assessments for, you know, uh, telcos, banks, and businesses, things like that. So, just kind of trying to keep up with all the new exploits and playing with the toys and seeing what you can break or get into.
So, Jon, when you talk about pen testing, that's a term that's it's short for penetration. But when there's a couple of terms out there, right? Vulnerability testing, I hear a lot about, and penetration testing, and they're often thrown around in the industry. Are those two actually the same or similar, or what's the difference there?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion with that. I'd say, for the most part, the vulnerability testing is more we're actually trying to look at the network to see what vulnerabilities might exist. And for example, when I first started doing this kind of testing, what we would do is we would just scan the network for addresses and scan them for their IP address to see if we could connect to them. And then we would just try to port scan to see what ports were open. And then we would just ban or grab or try to log into those ports. And once we got in, then the software would tell us what version they're running, right? So if it was Microsoft Exchange Server, we would see the version that was running, and then we would just go online, and then we would just search online on Google, or at the time it was probably Yahoo or something, and then we would find out what was vulnerable and try to write it down. Well, nowadays the scanners are much more sophisticated, and they kind of have their own database. So vulnerability testing, what we're doing is we're just basically scanning through. I kind of call it like ding dong ditch kind of thing, right? So we're just kind of want to see what's available, but not necessarily trying to get into the network. Whereas penetration testing is we're actively trying to exploit those vulnerabilities that we found in that first step, the vulnerability test the network.
So, do you typically do the vulnerability first? Is it one before the other, or how does that work? Because it sounds like vulnerability, you're kind of staying on the outer edge versus penetration, really testing and breaking through that network.
Yeah, it's a good question. So originally, when I first started in this field of doing the security stuff, most companies were a little sensitive to the penetration testing part, right? They were afraid we might break something, and we actually did on a couple occasions for some legacy equipment. So vulnerability scans was something they would pay us to do, and we would just simply show them what we think could possibly happen, but we're not sure. Whereas now the industry is getting to be more, aware of the potential issues, and so now we do more of the penetration testing along with vulnerability testing.
So, from an industry perspective, especially a lot of our focus at CCI has been on service providers. And we've been talking about it quite a bit. Like, you really need to consider security and the options you have there. I get the sense that, you know, those companies are taking things a bit more seriously all of a sudden, which is a great thing. Are you seeing that as well in the industry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it used to be kind of a thing where you just didn't worry about security until you got hacked, and then that was a big problem. So I think now people are realizing that there's a lot more, and there's just a lot more to secure. I mean, we never used to have half, or today probably the majority of our employees are working remotely, and all the smartphones, the tablets. Used to have every security BlackBerries around, and their IT guys would manage all the security. And now there's just so many potential touch points where an attacker could get into your network. I think people are starting to realize that and taking a lot closer look at securing their networks.
And then back to the vulnerability testing versus the pen testing. Is there a big difference in the price there?
You know, In most cases, I mean, the vulnerability testing, a lot of times what we see is we're just, like I said, we're running specialized software with intelligence to try to quickly scan all those addresses, see what the ports are open, see what software version they're running, and try to find out what's going on there. From the penetration testing, that's where we get creative, where we can write our own scripts and we can do all kinds of fun stuff. Like for example, a typical pen test tool, they're gonna if you're running Nessus or some of those open source software, they're gonna look for default passwords, that kind of stuff for some devices. But in a telco environment, we all know there's video middleware. We know the access platforms. They all have, for the most part, those vendors kind of use the same passwords to initially turn that up.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of companies just change those passwords. So some of those testing for vulnerability scan, it might not notice that there's actually a vulnerability there because it thinks that doesn't know the default password. Whereas when we actually pen test, we have that information and we can try to get a little further into the network.
Got it. So you've been doing this for quite a few years, security assessments, 10 plus years, right?
Yep.
In that time as an ethical hacker, what would you say is the most, I would say, insecure part of almost any network, and why is it?
I think people say it a lot. It's the most insecure part is people. They're easy to trick, and I think most of the telcos that I've worked in the past, it's a friendly location, right? I mean, South Dakota is super friendly, and you can talk to anybody for the most part.
Right.
In the street, I think people just have a little bit too much trust and a little bit too much power for their users. A lot of, they have people, maybe they have the same people using, multiple people using the same password for the logins, or they just get somebody in the network and they don't really truly look at what they should have access to, which maybe isn't a problem if you trust that person, but or it's probably still a problem, but you might think it's not a problem. But then if someone's able to compromise their account, they'll have access to more than that employee should have had in the first place.
We start with the information security risk assessment. And so is that the right place to start if you're a customer? And then how do you go about getting into a security assessment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the one thing I have seen coming up till recently is we hear a lot of customers saying, you know what, I'm not ready for the full-blown assessment. Let's just do a remote pen test and shoot me a report, and then if we see some issues, we'll have you come in and do further. And honestly, I think that's kind of truthfully a waste of money, because what you're doing is you're kind of setting a false sense of security if all we're doing is hitting the outside of the network, because almost all the fun stuff that we find is stuff that's actually not coming from the outside through your firewall. So, I mean, I think the first step is just to kind of sit down with some of our team and take a look at the network. What we normally do is just kind of get with the clients and sit them down and show them, what kind of services we have, take a look at their network, try to understand, what their business need is. And that's the big piece of it, I think, is a lot of times security assessments are really focused on the IT,
Mm-hmm.
Is this firewall secured kind of thing, versus taking into account the entire business as a whole and determining, where are the highest end assets, how do we actually look at this from a business perspective. And then once we kind of sit down and understand the network, we typically just drop a proposal that will provide the list of services that we have. And then depending on if it's an on-site engagement, we'll send people on site, to try to break in buildings and, interview. That's the other big piece of it, is we actually take a holistic view with it from management side as well. So instead of just coming in and interviewing the network technicians or, the engineers, we sit down with the actual management, HR, those people, and make sure that we have a good understanding of how the entire, the footprint or their posture looks, not just from a technical perspective, but also how their policies and procedures and what their employees' understandings are of how they should be handling cybersecurity.
Got it. We spoke a lot before just about the policy, the process of people, how important that is, and we dive pretty deep into that, where we think it's somewhat of a differentiator between others that do similar things. So when we do that and we get done with that process, we provide a score, an assessment score. Yep. Talk about that. Like, how do you come up with that score? Where do you what kind of detail is provided in that?
Yeah, that's a fun question. So the score, I think, is probably one of the most important parts of the assessment. And the reason why I say that is because it's our score is based on similar to like a credit score, right? So between 300 and 850, depending on what credit reporting agency you're using. But what we've seen a lot in the past is clients have asked us that they don't just want to know how secure they are, but they want to understand how do I look compared to the industry?
Mm.
Or,
Yep.
or the other way is, how do you determine, if we do an assessment with one of our red teams come on site and do an assessment, and then we give the results, and then how do you come back 6 months later and evaluate and determine, is your security posture improving, or is it not improving? And so how do you put some metrics towards that? And the other piece that's really nice about the way we do that scoring is we break it into different tiers. And so for example, we have administrative controls has its own tier, or physical controls, or internal technical controls. So they can kind of see, hey, we're doing really, really good on the physical side of it, but we're kind of struggling,
Mm.
at the administrative controls, and to be more granular, but yet give the management the ability to kind of see
Yep.
in more of a visual where they really lie with the rest of the industry, and how are they improving as they go forward.
It has to be kind of enjoyable delivering that score at times when you catch customers, I'm guessing, a bit off guard on where they think they're going to do well and where they don't. I mean, have you run into that where it's just like total shocker?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I think for the most part, most people kind of know they've got some issues. So I think for the most part, it's not as always a shocker, but there are
Okay.
times that people are maybe a little bit more, and that kind of depends on how close the management is to the IT staff to understand what's going on, right? Because sometimes you've got like management that doesn't have that good a relationship, or that close relationship with IT, and they're not following as closely, and so that might be more of a shock versus maybe a manager that's kind of technical and kind of likes to still play in this, and that's a lot of times they kind of know what's coming before they get this score.
You had mentioned prior red team and a blue team. Talk a little bit about that philosophy and just the difference between the two. And we talk about not grading our own homework, and I think that probably plays pretty strongly into that concept. What is the difference, and why does CCI use another team other than just CCI?
Yeah, so it's almost like two different, a little bit two different cultures, right? Like if you took a look at our team that does the red team exercise, where a red team is more the active, right? They're trying to pretend like they're an attacker. They're trying to think like an attacker. I mean, those guys are sitting in a dark room. They got the lights turned off. They got their gamer headsets on. They got stacks of Red Bull and Mountain Dew cans in the corner.
Right.
Those guys, the whole goal is just to get in there and see. It's pretty fun. I mean, I've done a lot of assessments where you're literally just sitting there. I mean, you literally have the signed paperwork saying you can within reason hack this network. So it's pretty exciting, pretty fun. And then the blue team guys are the ones that kind of come in and do the cleanup. So red team comes in and they find all those issues that might be going on. They find all the vulnerabilities, and then we work together with the red team with our blue team to try to address those problems. So they're pretty important, and the difference there is that it's kind of competitive, right? Because the red team's always trying to show up the blue team's trying to show up the red team. So it's kind of a fun way to make sure the networks are secured, but at the same time, kind of competitive in nature to try to see who can outdo the other team. So definitely important to have both of those, and it's nice that because I mean, I'm the kind of guy that if I'm sitting looking at my monitor and there's one button in the middle that says okay, and I could see it right away. If somebody's looking over my shoulder, I can't seem to see that button for some reason. And I think that's
Mm.
a lot of times when we're the blue team and we think we have everything configured properly, you just need that other look from somebody that didn't provision that to maybe find some of those mistakes.
Makes a lot of sense. So, with that experience, what are some of the most missed elements of cybersecurity postures that you've seen in the 10 plus years of assessing networks?
The big one really is just lack of visibility. Most people don't know what they don't know. And I've asked questions a lot at shows, like, if let's say that someone called you right now and said that your network was hacked, what would you do? And most people don't really know. They don't have a plan. They don't have a written plan that says we're gonna call so and so and shut this down. There's just really no
Mm-hmm.
structure to that. So a lot of it is just lack of visibility, or even on the network itself. If they're not, someone could be trying to hack into to one portion of the network and all over the place, and they just don't know it until it's too late. So the idea is, to kind of have that visibility so you can proactively detect the potential breach and stop it before it gets into the network.
That makes a lot of sense. And what I'm seeing recently is associations and groups that our customer base is part of, has been talking about security for such a long time. But what's happening, unfortunately, is some of those members, friends of theirs, are actually getting that penetration into their network and then ransomware and different things. So you hate to say that it's catching on because of that, but are you seeing similar things in the industry?
Yeah, I won't name any company names, but there's a certain company that I believe they were hacked and they didn't even know it for like 3 years,
Yeah,
right? The hackers were in their network, and a lot of times when you see these attacks, by the time we detect that they're in the network, they've been in there for quite a while. So it's getting to be more and more. And with business wise, if I have other options, like if my bank was hacked and they got lost all my credit card numbers, I have so many options to where I can go. I'm probably not going to stay at that bank, and that's the same way
that's
with
right.
with service providers or whatever. I mean, if I have other options, I'm going to protect me first. I mean, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. What seems to be the biggest challenge to companies adopting technologies to limit that exposure?
I think some of it is the fact that there are just so many options. There's so many vendors, and some equipment is, if you want to buy the best of the best, it's not always going to probably do that. One box isn't going to do everything, or you're going to be paying a whole bunch of money for that box, or and it's just kind of navigating through how do we kind of integrate all this. If you want your malware protection from this vendor and you want your firewall from this vendor, and you're trying to do best of breed. If those devices aren't talking to each other, it's kind of hard to really have a cohesive sort of security, secure network. It's just hard to manage all those different interfaces. Those are probably some of the bigger ones.
So as we provide and others provide more security tools to fight against the hacks and different things, is it also becoming somewhat easier for the hackers to do their job because of all the free tools that are out there for them to use? And then is that kind of a deterrent for some of the customers that we may help to get outside help to sort through that?
So it's true, there are lots of cool tools out there to do some super sexy fun tools that you can do all kinds of fun stuff. I have two stepkids here, and they're always doing a thing online. My kids are always parents are always chasing their kids to make sure that they're not getting into trouble online. So I think that it's those tools are out there. We use a lot of them too, but the key is being able to really understand what that tool's setting out for you. You can easily run Nessus you download Nessus, or there's all kinds of other open source free ones. You hit your network with it, it spits out a report, and then you go through. But to really know how all those devices tie together, to understand what that really means, what those exploits are, and that's where you need a little bit of expertise. We also have guys in house that do they write scripts and special programs to enhance the skills and abilities of those free and commercial products. So it really comes down to not just having the right tools, but actually knowing how to interpret the data properly to really understand how secure you are.
Yes. So I have to ask you a question, maybe put you on the spot a little bit. So the last time I was listening to some of your stories, you have some good ones. So is there anything you can share with us that some fun story, don't name names, that you can put you on the spot, sorry, but can come up with that you ran into an experience that kind of stands out in your mind?
Yeah, so I was once hired to do the hardest part for me personally for network security assessments is the social engineering part. So some people love that stuff, right? They'll go. I've had coworkers that have gone right into bank vaults and tricked them into getting them into bank vaults. Myself, it's just my wife will tell you I'm not good at lying, so it's tough. But I do remember a time that they wanted me to go into the it was a very big company. It had good security, and they wanted me to go in and try to trick the people up in the finance department into thinking I was the copy repairman and let me into this new building. And you know how copiers are, they always need repairmen, so that's a pretty obvious one. So yeah, I remember I was in my car, I was just like shaking. I got to the door, I knocked on I actually had like a phone you had to pick up, and the lady picked up, and she's like, I couldn't even believe she let me in, because I thought I was gonna pass out the whole thing. But first told her I was a printer repairman, then I said I was a copy repairman. Then she said, well, which are you, printer or copier? And I said printer, and then she let me in, and I was able to walk all over that network. So it just goes to prove you don't have to be super good at being deceptive, because I'm pretty sure anybody could have taken me out of a lineup right away on that one.
Very good. I don't think so, but I'll take your word for it. Okay, so as far as getting started, if somebody wanted to get started, what does it look like, a typical network security assessment, the process from CCI, kind of from that cradle to grave?
Yeah, so and we kind of touched a little bit on this
Hmm.
before, but it's really just getting hold of the account team. And I think what's kind of fun, CCI is very, our red team is very accomplished and even won, I believe, a few competitions like in,
Hmm.
um, is it DEF CON? Is that
Yep, that's right.
Well, yeah, so we won a competition in DEF CON, capture the flag. I mean, it's one of those things where I think we just get the team in to kind of show we can show sample, scrub sampled reports so you can see what it's going to kind of look like, talk through the process, and it's really about getting meetings together with the management side, with the technical side, so we all understand what we're trying to accomplish, and then we get a better understanding of the network, what size it is, what you're looking to secure, and then we'll just get together with our team and put together a proposal, and then sit down with you guys and figure out which parts you want. Do you want to have a you want us to try sneaking into offices? Do you want us to try to clone RFID keys, that kind of stuff, and then we just kind of go from there.
Got it. And so kind of the end of the whole process, it seems like, is, does our customers need a CISO, or should they have a virtual CISO? So explain what this whole CISO concept is, and how we can help there.
Yeah, so the CISO part, that's the one that's maybe a little bit less um, less well known probably, and
Hmm.
and I feel like whenever we initially talk to people, the typical response is, "I don't need a CISO, we're fine." And a lot of times, what that is that again, it's kind of back to like the separation between like the technical folks and the business folks. And so you got kind of the business guys, and obviously cybersecurity has kind of always been considered as maybe a cost type of thing, right? It doesn't actually bring in revenue; it just costs more money.
Hmm.
And the technical guys, they either want to do it or they want the toys, and there's always sort of that disconnect. So with a CISO, we have the ability to have somebody that's kind of that bridge between the technical, that understands the technical, understands the business side, and he's the guy that's following up on all the developing the new threats and trying to figure out their security infrastructure and their budget and their investigations for forensics, and even like governance for like legal things. Are there certain legal, there's obviously certain legal requirements that you have to have for storing customer data, if it's CP&I kind of stuff. It's one of those roles that is very important to have a good glue between the technical kind of gearheads and the business people to be able to help kind of translate the value of the various security offerings between those two teams.
So, in your experience, have you found that that typically comes towards the end, as you go through the assessment? The red team, the blue team, kind of make sure and understand where the holes are in your network, fix those holes, and then is that when that position kind of really starts to shine as far as its importance?
It depends. I mean, in some
Mm-hmm.
cases, what happens is the client just doesn't see a real need right now for a CISO. Like if you kind of look back, a lot of the technical people for service providers, as early as 10 years ago, they were picked to be the data guy because they're the first one to buy a computer and had one in their home. So there's sort of that. They're still technical people, but it's not really so much. They don't see that they need a business and a technical kind of lead. So normally what we'll see is we'll get a company that will maybe first do the assessment, and then as we go through and show them the vulnerabilities and the risks from a business perspective, that's when it makes it more clear that we might need to think about having like a virtual CISO or CISO on staff. That being said, it's always best to bring that guy in if there is one initially, so that they can help with the planning and understand the whole process while we're doing the assessment. So definitely would like to have at the beginning, and during the process to help facilitate. But if not, usually we see people are seeing value in that after they get through the assessment part of it.
Got it. And so when you look at the industry as a whole, um, what's your recommendation? Like, why should someone contact CCI to get started on this? What are their vulnerabilities? Do they know? It's kind of a tough question, but is there an easy answer to that on why now?
The YCCI part, I mean, the thing that, our team is highly skilled. I mean, our red team does nothing but red team. They're not, going out and turning up routers and stuff. I mean, they're literally just, their whole thing is just to hack into networks. And our blue team that works with the red team, we are a service provider. So when we go
Mm-hmm.
out and take a look at a service provider network, we write off techs ourselves. So, we have the guys that are, the smart guys on the route switch, on the data center, all the pre-sales, post-sales, engineering, field kind of thing, and then we've got a red team that comes through, and just tries to shoot holes in what we have. So we kind of have kind of the big picture of how networks should be secure. Or at least we're very aware of the threats that are coming in.
Agreed. So, Jon, thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure. Always good stories from you, my friend. And until we talk again, this is Joe Smith, CCI Systems, and we're here making life better.